You figuring it?
Yes. Okay, so I am recording this for the purpose of being able to go back to it later and check it for my notes. Is it okay that I record you?
Okay.
It's okay?
I'm getting an ice pack for the purpose of making my knee feel better.
Okay.
Okay.
So, my name is Harrison Dwayne Jones. It is, let's see, June 19th. I am located in Rexburg, Idaho, and I'm speaking with
Yeah, you're sideways. All right.
Cari Lynn Jones in
Carrie
Kingsville,
Lynn Miller
Utah.
Jones.
So,
Okay.
okay, so let's start off. Simple questions. So, when were you born?
May 5th. No, not May 5th. Thing. The 5th of May 12th, 1964.
Okay, and where were you born? Do you know if it was in a hospital or actually at
Yes.
home?
In a hospital in Bountiful, Davis County, Utah.
Okay. Could you describe just the area at the time if you remember it?
I don't remember anything. I was just born.
So it was just a place.
It was a hospital. That's all I know. In
Oh,
Bountiful.
okay, and at this time, uh, was Randy born at this time? Your brother?
He's older than me, so yes. He was not a year old because he is 10 days less than a year older than I am.
So that would mean that growing up, you were relatively in the same age group.
Yeah. Grandma said it was like raising twins.
Did she say that in a good way or a bad way?
Depends on the time. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
Okay. So, what are some childhood memories that you actually remember?
I remember when we lived in Woods Cross,
Where is Woods Cross?
right next to Bountiful.
Okay.
It's the next city over.
Okay. I don't know Utah,
And
so.
anyway, so I remember in the basement feeding the fish because Grandpa had lots of fish tanks. And we fed all kinds of stuff, peas, a whole bag of fish pellets, and probably a million other things. I remember my friends next door, Mindy and Josie. And Mindy now is actually in our ward. So that's kind of funny to have a friend from when you were 4 years old living next door. So that's probably some of the earliest memories I can think of. Remember when I turned 5, my birthday party. We had it on the front lawn and played. Don't remember school, kindergarten at all. Remember moving to Arizona when I was 6. And my aunt, actually Grandpa's aunt and uncle, who were felt like my aunt and uncle too. And we would go over at their house, and she would always spoil us because they didn't really have grandkids that were too close at that time.
Uh, how so spoiled? Because
Oh, she was always give us candy, and I remember her buying different toys or outfits, and so that type of spoil.
Do you
She
remember?
always, they always gave us Christmas presents and birthday presents and stuff.
Do you remember any of the specific toys or whatnot?
No, I don't. I remember my grandma T making a quilt for me that my son has since kind of loved to death. That was a blue flannel one that was tied.
Uh,
And I had a stuffed frog that I don't know who made for me, but I had a stuffed frog that I loved. And I loved when we would come to Arizona or to Utah and visit Grandma and Grandpa Miller and get to go to Lagoon and ride the rides with my cousins, Andrea and Laura, and would go to Grandma and Grandpa T's. And I remember their basement, they had an apartment. I remember playing with my cousin Karen and playing out in their yard. And then when Grandpa died, I was like 7, and Grandma moved into the condos, and she would go there, and she always made huge breakfasts, and she always made sure to make me a banana cream pie because it was my favorite.
they are good.
Yeah, and would eat it when we would eat with Grandma and Grandpa Miller, Grandpa and my dad and Randy, and sometimes the uncles would go pheasant hunting. So I remember helping pull feathers off the pheasants and going out in the garden and helping pick potatoes and green beans. So we could, and then Grandma would always fried the pheasant, so it was like fried chicken, but it was pheasant. And we used to play a game on who got the most BBs. So we'd have, that. Unless Yukio, who owned the pheasant farm, would just kill the pheasants for Grandpa. He'd just wring their neck, and then there wasn't any BBs.
So, what kind of things did you actually do for fun?
My cousins at Grandma and Grandpa Miller's, Andrea and Laura and I, when we'd go, we'd do the fun that go, to Lagoon, which was always fun. And when we'd go hiking, and at that time, Grandma and Grandpa Miller's house, there was only like 2 more houses up the mountain. So we'd go hiking up the mountain. And there was one house, the last house, because the house next to Grandma and Grandpa was owned by a family named Goodrich's. And they had a daughter that was about our age, Nan, and sometimes we'd play with her and she'd go with us. But we would first hike downtown, and there was a small little grocery store downtown, and I don't even think that's there anymore if I remember right. It was next to the bank, and we'd buy candy. And we always got Jolly Ranchers, and watermelon was always my favorite. And then would take our bags of candy and would hike up the mountain. And the last house had a flagpole and had a flag up there. And we would always stop and say the Pledge of Allegiance because we were weird kids. And then would hike up the mountain. We always thought we were at the top, but we probably didn't even hike a mile. I'm sure we were pretty. So that was one thing we loved to do. We loved to go swimming because they had a pool when we were growing up. So we loved to be able to go swimming. And we also, one of our favorite things was to go in the irrigation ditch and try and follow it as far as we could. Basically just wade in the ditch all the way up. And we loved to go out in the orchard and sit in the cherry tree and eat cherries until we were pretty sick. We all had diarrhea.
I understand that one.
Mm-hmm. So that was some of the fun things. And we would play the game 31 with the Millers. And at Grandma Grandpa T's, we would play like board games. Because we weren't old enough to know how, and dominoes and stuff, because we weren't old enough to play the pinochle and everything like with the others, which, ugh. Anyway.
Now, were there any weird board games? Because board games are one of those that some have stayed the same forever, but some have existed.
Yeah, we played like Life and Parcheesi and what other board games did we used to play? Sorry. The classics that are still around. Ants in the Pants, I think I remember playing that one. And Tiddlywinks or something like that, pick up sticks. I mean, the old ones that were probably around when Grandma was a kid too.
So, a number of these weren't actually new when you had them. They were aged.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. Yeah.
So, when did you start school?
Kindergarten when I was 5.
Now, do you have any significant school experiences, whether then or later on?
I remember I don't really remember kindergarten or, in Utah. In Arizona, I went to Roadrunner Elementary. I was friends with Lisa. That's when I met her, was like in first grade. She was Lisa Louder then, obviously, and now Lisa Wilkins. And I took ballet from one of my friend Michelle Piper's mom. She taught ballet in her converted garage. And I remember we did a dance recital at the school as well as at the church. And I remember at the school I was really sad because Grandma wasn't real happy with me because I got chalk. And in those days it was like the yellow chalk all over my tutu that still I think are boxed somewhere. I don't think, unless I got rid of it when we moved, I don't remember. But your sisters used to play dress up, but the stain was still there.
So she had somewhat of a point.
Yeah. So remember that. I don't know. Don't remember that much about school. Remember Lisa and our teacher in, I think it might have been 5th grade. He wasn't real nice and he had broke a leg or something, was in a wheelchair, and we would fantasize about pushing him down the hill. That's cruel, but yeah. And for 5th grade, before that, I lived, so it had to be in 4th grade that happened. In 5th grade, we moved to Pocatello, and I played basketball when we lived in Pocatello for the year.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then we moved, all I did, because I was tall, I was the center, so all I knew really how to do, I couldn't shoot a basket, but I could steal the ball and then do the jump shot, and I was taller than anyone, so I usually could get it to our team. That was about it. That was the extent of my sports career.
So I never realized you lived in Pocatello. So did you actually move around a lot?
No. After Pocatello, we moved back to Phoenix, basically the same exact place where we'd moved from.
So why did you move to Pocatello then?
Because Grandpa ran Parks and Sons, the garbage company, for his uncle that's why we moved to Phoenix in the first place, so he could work for him. And so he worked in Pocatello for him for a while for that year. And then he had to move back to run the company in Phoenix. And his cousin, Uncle Clyde's son, Rick, went ahead and was running the company in Pocatello then.
So, what was mealtime like? Because I remember what it was like for me growing up, but how was it for you?
About the same way. We always sat down, we ate together. Grandma always cooked, different meals, pretty much the same kinds for the most part that I did. Do goulash and everything.
Was there
We got to
like,
go out here and there. I remember Grandpa, we would go to Chinese food in Phoenix, and Grandpa would get so mad because I always ordered sweet and sour shrimp. And he used to get so mad at me that I needed to try new things. But that's what I wanted.
I understand that one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know growing up that we almost had assigned seats at the dinner table, just spots where we all almost always used to sit.
I don't remember if we did or not. I mean, there was only 4 of us, so.
So, what were Grandma and Grandpa like when you were growing up?
I don't know, regular. I didn't really get in trouble. I was, for the most part, the good girl. I liked to have slumber parties, and they would let me have slumber parties all the time. I don't know, they're just regular. Grandpa used to really ride Randy to do chores. I remember having to do dishes and do chores and, keep my room cleaned, and Grandma would get mad at me if I didn't clean my room.
Yeah, ignore my room in the background because, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. When I was in middle school is when, they would fight, and then they separated and Grandpa moved out. Then they got back together for a little bit, and then they were divorced.
So, when exactly did that happen?
I was in middle school, so can't remember how old that would be. 12, 14, 13? 13, 14,
Pre-teen
right there.
age.
Yeah. But before that, it was fun. I mean, we would take family vacations. Usually it was just coming to Utah. And I remember Grandpa would buy bubble gum, and we would have bubble blowing contests while we were driving. And if you passed a skunk, he always would sing Dead Skunk in the middle of the road. And we would, at night, they used to have like Mystery Theater on the radio. And I remember listening to that while we would drive. And he never liked to stop, so we were always complaining that had to go to the bathroom, and he wouldn't stop.
I can relate.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how was your relationship with Randy?
We used to be best friends, and then puberty kind of hit, and I got taller, and I think he resented that. And since we were so close, a lot of our friends were kind of the same. So then we just fought. And yeah. So we didn't get really to be friends again until more of adulthood. And then when our parents divorced and when Grandma got married to Grandpa, They moved to Colorado, and Randy went with them, and I stayed with Grandpa in Arizona because I didn't want to leave my friends. It was my junior year in high school. So Grandma always thinks I picked Grandpa over her, but really I picked my friends over both of them. Grandpa just happened to be where my friends were. And luckily the house he bought was in my school district and everything, so.
So, do you remember any times when you were growing up where you did get in trouble?
I remember getting yelled at that we took Grandpa's hammer, and he was accusing us of taking his hammer, Randy and I both, and it ended up that he put it somewhere. And let's see, I really don't remember getting in trouble. They were too focused on Randy always being in trouble. Other than just like getting on me to clean my room, I really don't remember being in trouble.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at a list of questions to see
You're
if
fine.
there's any that, like, so what was it like living with Grandpa after basically they
It
split?
was good. Grandpa would always get frustrated because he thought I should do more cleaning and didn't keep the house clean enough necessarily. So he did end up hiring someone from work to clean the house. But I mean, I was in high school and I worked too. So
Yeah,
my first job was at Baskin Robbins, and I was 15 when I got hired. And I worked there. And then my senior year, I worked at a place called Brant's. It was interior. They had like wallpaper and some furniture, but mainly was the wallpaper and fabric type samples. And so I worked for them because I was in HERO, which was home economics related occupations. So I was pretty busy, and that's when I did the cotillion as well.
yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, it was Phoenix Honors Cotillion. So we met weekly, and they would teach you, things like how to set a table. They would teach interior decorating deals, and we did a projects for different things. They would teach clothing and how to coordinate things. We did went to the opera. We went to ballet. We went to a French restaurant. So I mean, they taught you basically how to act in society as well as like keep a home and stuff. And it was from girls all across Phoenix in the area. It was like, I think there was like 10 or 12 different high schools or more. And I was in it. Lisa was in it. Another one of our friends, Lori Bagwell, was in it. And at the end of having all the deals, there was a ball, and the governor was there and shook your hand, and we went under it was, I'm not sure if it was like it was like a color guard. It was a military, and I don't remember where they came from, and they had swords, and you went under the swords, and we did a first dance with your dad, and then you went to your date. And my date was someone I worked with at Baskin Robbins. He was actually a year younger than I was, but I still felt bad because I was kind of a jerk to him, because that's when I had started to date someone else, but it was too late to have him. He couldn't go, and so yeah, Jim went. And yeah, I still feel guilty about that, but it's what it is. And
And
we had our white dress and carried a red rose, and we had the long white gloves. And
so, what was your dating scene like? If,
my dating,
yeah, because if,
I didn't really date.
really, because it sounds like you at least had two people you dated.
Yeah. So my first date was probably junior year. I would have been 16. And it was in seminary. The seminary teacher, he did seminary at two different high schools, at Phoenix or Paradise Valley High School and Shadow Mountain, where I was. And he fixed up, I don't remember quite how it went, but anyway, I went on the date with the kid that was from Paradise Valley High School, and that was my first date. And we probably went out maybe 4 times. And I didn't really date Jim. He was a friend. He's who I went to Cotillion with, but the only one, and then I dated senior year was Aaron. So that's really my extent of my dating. I had a blind date when I went to Rick's. That was it. I didn't really date until, yeah, and went out with that. And
Yeah, so tell me about Aaron. It's one where uh, I remember growing up and hearing you mention him, but not quite hearing about him.
I just met him. He was in the police academy when I met him. He was already a returned missionary, so he was, a few years older than I was. And just he was out living on, his own, and Grandpa didn't like him very much. He kind of scared him off and told him basically he wasn't good enough for me. So we were engaged and had it, date set, but he hadn't bought me a ring because I wanted him to buy a house first. And Grandpa scared him off, and he just kind of fell off the earth for me, and which was fine, hindsight, but, and Grandpa didn't admit that he had scared him off like that until a few years ago. So we broke up while I was at Rick's. He just stopped kind of calling or writing, and then after I'd moved back, he actually came over one time and was trying to apologize, and I basically told him what a jerk he was. Because he did it just, if he didn't want to go out, he needed to just spit it out instead of being a jerk about things. And it ended up that Dad and Aaron actually were in Young Men's together in Phoenix. So the first time that Dad and I went out, there was a fireside, and he was talking to Aaron and saying he had gone out with me, the night before, this great gal, and her name was Cari Jones, and I guess Aaron was like, I know her.
Don't you mean Carrie Miller?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, Carrie Miller.
So when did you first actually get the Ricks? Because I was looking.
I went in 1982 after high school, so it would have been like the start of, like, they didn't have like they do now with the tracks. So it was just winter, fall. So it would have been like probably September. And I roomed with my cousin Laura at Somerset Apartments. And I only went there for the one semester. And then I came home, and I lived with Dad and Grandma. his grandpa had gotten remarried by then. Actually, that would have been his third marriage, because he was only married to Kristen for a year, who was after Grandma. And so he was married. So I lived with them and at that time they lived in Tucson. So I lived with them in Tucson, and then they were building the house, making their log house, and we're going to move. So then I moved in with my girlfriends and worked. And I went to MCC, to Mesa Community College, while I was living with Grandpa and Grandma. So I went there first semester. And then I moved in with my girlfriends by Paradise Valley Mall, and there was Gretchen and Lisa, at that time Wilkins, now Lisa Hatch, were my roommates. So there was the three of us. And that's when I met Dad and started dating him. I met him in Young Adults, the church.
Okay, so you met him actually in Phoenix, not in...
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you think your childhood impacted who you are as an adult?
Well, a lot. Going to church, being active, helped me have the standards. A lot of focus on, work ethics, which still is impactful for me, and family. I mean, it was always really important. Every year we went to go to see our grandparents and cousins. So, instilled on me the importance of family and work and doing chores and helping each other.
So, how did your childhood impact how you raised your own children?
Somewhat, because I wanted you guys to have the same thing, doing chores, learning that work ethic, learning to support each other and help each other, going to church so you would have, good friends and surround yourself with some good morals.
So, how do you think children's experience today is different from when you were a kid?
Well, we played outside more because we didn't have the computers and the games and the handhelds. And I remember getting Pong when I was probably 14. Grandpa got like the Pong, and it was to me so boring because it was very slow. But we had, in high school, we had like the video games. You'd go to the arcades type deal. But I was never really into that, and still am not into that. Wasn't my thing. So I remember going out and playing with friends, and would go out in the desert and play, and I did more crafts and sewing and doing things like that. I mean, I remember watching TV and, stuff like that, but I just think we learn to socialize and play together more than kids do now.
Okay. So, how do you think childhood today is the same as yours?
Well, I think you still get the same pressures. Do people like me? You know, school pressures, tests and stuff like that. And, are you in the in crowd, or are you on the out crowd? Are you a jock, or are you a druggie, or, just the gang, people you hang out with, or being bullied and picked on. I remember my would have been 7th grade, someone kind of bullying me. So I went out and made friends with the biggest girl in school. So I had a protection.
I can't say I quite get that one because, yeah,
You were the biggest kid.
I was the biggest kid.
Yeah. I still remember her. Her name was Jamie, and she was a good friend. And yeah, no, they didn't pick on me after that.
So, what would you want children today to experience from your childhood?
More going out, riding bikes, playing together, doing more of that.
And that's mainly,
Playing Barbies. Lisa and I used to love to play Barbies together for hours. We used to argue over who could have their Ken be the $6 million man.
and that's because you just want them to have more of the social aspect.
Yes.
So, what would you like children today to not experience from your childhood?
Well, for my particular one, probably divorce, because that was hard. Um, I don't know. I can't think of anything. I think it was a good childhood.
But but no divorce.
Hmm?
But no divorce.
Yeah, no divorce. Divorce sucks. I mean, there's cases where if it's an abusive situation, yes, okay. But I think my parents just were too selfish and didn't try and really work it.
But would you say that they did actually end up with the right people, more or less?
Probably. That's who they wanted. It wouldn't have been. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think there are more problems kids face today or less, about the same?
I think more. Definitely more. There's more. I mean, not that we didn't have, you know, issues with drug and alcohol usage and stuff like that, but I think it's more. I think there's more depression today than there was then because I don't know, if it's preservatives or what, or just the pressures they feel, or there's so much out there that makes them feel like they've got to live in this perfect society and they've got to be this perfect person. I mean, there's more pressures in that area than there was when I was growing up.
Okay. So, just wrapping up, is there any last thing that you can think of that you'd like to note regarding your childhood or even childhood as experienced today?
I don't know. I don't know. I think, kids need to remember their parents are just trying to struggle to figure things out. Sometimes they're smarter than the kid thinks. Sometimes they're stupider than they think.
Okay.
That's the hardest thing you'd ever do is to be a parent. So kids forget about that. Ooh.
Okay. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to sit here and talk with me.
Okay. I love you.
I love you too.